Cine, the Council on International Non-Theatrical Events, has awarded this film a Cine Eagle in token of its excellence and has selected it to represent the United States of America in international motion picture events abroad.
I loved movement, performing. I just loved the theater. As a young child, I saw the movie The Red Shoes, in which Maura Shira was obsessed with dance. Much later, I discovered this huge treasure box in my neighborhood in Brooklyn that brought all these memories together. The image of The Red Shoes always stayed with me, but it was the Brooklyn Academy of Music, that place, that brought them to life. I felt very disoriented coming here, either by bus or car. It's kind of a hodgepodge landscape. I did not like the feel of the walk to BAM either. It's not the right kind of feeling you have in anticipation of going to the theater, say to Lincoln Center in the heart of the city. So what I started doing was to fantasize on how I could make the passage to BAM livelier, I guess more inviting, to give it a focal point. It's an urban neighborhood that's seen much better times. And the whole idea of taking an image that's inside this fortress-like structure and breaking open the building and putting it on the outside of the building to communicate to the direct neighborhood what goes on in this building is something that I was after. Because I found that oftentimes people who live within a neighborhood in an institution such as BAM will be intimidated to come inside. They won't enter into the building because although it's close, it's of another world. I wanted to know if you could put a very joyful piece of sculpture in a space and change the atmosphere around it. Well, I'll find out.
She gonna put one there and one on the side right by that window. They're gonna be 30 feet long. What?
Every day I made drawings, sketches, and models. Then I moved my studio into BAM, where I worked to find the right scale and the right form. In the end, it's something I often sense in my body. You know, when it feels right. Funding was a big hurdle. It was tough to get. After a year into the project, Fried of London, the British ballet shoemakers, became my sponsors. Their cobblers actually made Maura Shira's Red Shoes in the classic 1948 film. Working with an air-filled sculpture is somewhat like a wrestling match. It's not a form you can hold in your hand. It's almost like this thing is alive and we have to work together. It's not entirely in my control. You just cannot solve an air structure on a small scale. You actually have to create a full-size prototype. Then you have to test it outdoors. and get the information you need to go on. We took the prototype out to this factory in New Jersey. The prototype is very light. It only weighs about 50 pounds. The actual piece will end up weighing about 250 pounds, maybe 300. Including the ribbons. All told, there'll be about 500 yards of material. This is the pattern that I've been working on for about a year, and this will be the first time that I'll see it where it's hanging down. I've only seen it last week. Was the first time I saw it laying on its back, but the gravity was working against me, so it was squishing out instead of hanging the way it's supposed to. Connection's got to be really strong. I had to start lining up the right crews early: air structure engineers, industrial fabricators, and eventually professional riggers that didn't mind mountain climbing.
It's all right?
Yeah.
Are there lines hanging all the way to the ground?
No.
There's always things to cover the light over here.
Can you untwist it?
I don't know what that means. What does that mean to untwist it?
Look, this way. Go.
The wrong way!
The other way.
Wrong way!
That way.
Go the other way!
Joe, you gotta come in this way.
Gotta get these in the back!
You got it, Joe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looked over it.
With 6 months of work, they did not get hurt. Good. He almost got the bubble.
What bubble?
Top of the shoe, I don't like it.
Have somebody pull on the ground rope, just pull it out once and turn it this way for you. Do you think it's got negative curve in there?
I know it does. You know where you told me to put the tabs in?
Yeah, it's reverses up.
Reverse, and I don't like that pillow. As soon as I found pencils, I was making art. I was also making environments in my house, which somehow seemed like a very natural thing to do. When I went to art school, I began painting and drawing. It was a very European academic training, which I appreciated but became bored with. The idea of working within a rectangle seemed
very limiting and confining, and I started thinking more about sculpture and more about space. I became basically interested in cities as spaces, and I was moving from a sort of narrow focus to a wider focus in terms of how I was seeing. And I began to see the cities and public spaces as a place in which to work. As I was basically unlearning everything I learned in school, which was pretty traditional and very formalist, very purist stuff, I looked to myself to find imagery that expressed something that seemed important to me. And the images that came up were images about adults. Like, what does the grown-up world look like when you're a kid? I remember my mother and all the other women of the 50s looming over us, propped up on those ludicrous stiletto heels, and the magazines and the TV constantly presenting the ideal woman as a great pair of legs. So in the 70s, I began to exaggerate these media images. I moved my work actually right out into the street. I was trying to jolt people, surprise them, get them to see how ridiculously women are portrayed. I even titled my 58-foot outdoor sculpture Della Street after Perry Mason's high-heeled secretary. I think this is a wonderful medium because you can create huge volumes with just a thin layer of skin. I love the portability. So when I was invited to China in 1982, I created an 8-foot air-filled acrobat that I carried to Peking and Shanghai in my tote bag. I think what I'm after is that the image stays with you, hopefully forever, that it gets you on some level, and it stays there, and there's no need for it to remain and be permanent. Just like a good performance, it exists in a certain time frame, and that's it. But you remember it if it works well on you.
The red shoes helps to distinguish the building itself in the neighborhood, gives it a sense of what it is, which is a performing arts center. It's not a temple, it's not a church, it's not a place to worship, it's not a shrine, it's a place to enjoy art. And art is not something you go down on your knees before, it's something that you really have fun with, or should.
I was dubious because BAM's financial involvement in the project was limited by the very nature of what we are, our statement of purpose, and our own resources. So I knew that we would not be able to come in and bail her out, so to speak, until at the last moment. And so we had our fingers crossed.
Finally, after seeing Anne around for, 3 years now, I guess, that after seeing drawings and models and more drawings and more models and hearing more talk and seeing more proposals, that I couldn't believe that there really was the object.
I spoke to her before I began to work with her, and I could see that she really wanted this, and she'd been working on it for years, so, you know, I felt that I would like to help her.
She involved a lot of the neighborhood kids in the process, and the word sort of went out from that gang of kids to don't mess with the shoes. Lay off the shoes.
What I mainly do is to assist Anne in any way. And any service that she needs me to do, I'm mainly just helping hands, extra eyes, and extra mind. That's all I am.
We were worried about vandalism because they are outside. There is a rough element in the neighborhood, and we wanted to protect them. But what can you do? And what happened was that we might be walking down the street and we hear these really tough kids whom you might expect to be throwing things at them, saying, hey, what is that? Hey, is that a ballet shoe? A dancing shoe? Hey, that's neat.
One of my immediate reactions was that I thought this thing was going to disappear immediately, that it wouldn't last, you know, that if it made it overnight, we'd be lucky, she'd be lucky. And look, it's been up for several weeks now and nothing has happened, so something good has happened in this neighborhood, but I don't know exactly what happened and how that happened, but I know that something happened to preserve these things, and it has to do with whatever Anne did in going out in the community.
I lived here all my life. I grew up here just 2 blocks away, so I always seen BAM, but I never worked inside. And it gives a chance to the people like me. You could see something from the outside and understand it. Unless you get involved on the inside, then you really can't comprehend.
I'm building now a hard frame to put into the inflatable. Okay, up to this point, the inflatable has been rounding out here, and I want it to have a flat back. Look, this has a flat back. The other problem has been that in here, there's a covering so that I can keep the air in here, and the covering has been bubbling up like this. And we want this bubble to go down here. So in order to be able to pull this down, I'm building a frame which will be here, and I will then be able to put a disc in here and draw the material down into the frame. And this is called an anti-clastic curve or a saddle curve. And inflatables do not make this curve. They make this curve. What I'm doing now is changing the form, changing the structure. Usually the procedure in doing a large-scale sculpture is, by the time you get to this height, pretty technical. You essentially blow up what your smaller model indicates. But within this medium, when you change the curves from the smaller model to the larger model, they change. The curvature changes in this medium. And depending on what the air pressures are, there are a lot of variables with the structure. So I'm working at the kinks, basically, and just hanging it up there, working the material, working the air pressures, darting it as if I were tailoring a suit, and that was my model. So it's just hours and hours and hours of tucking and taping and pleating and climbing down the ladder and coming back and looking at it to see that it's shaping into what is in my mind's eye. My ideas feel that way. I mean, my ideas feel like they're in my head, and they stay there, and then there is like this, almost this physical sensation that it comes out of my body. And it's even when I look at whether the shape is right and the form is right, it's got to feel right again in here. You know, it's got to just feel right, and then I know it. No, I'm not sure about what I'm doing. And there are, I mean, literally weeks, months go by, and I feel very discouraged. As I solve one set of problems and take care of them, another set of problems occur. Like, once I get the form right, how is it then going to do in the wind? And then after we get the wind solved, how are we going to get it to drain outside? And I get up in the morning and I begin working, and I work all day and into the night. I go to sleep, I dream about it, I start up again. I don't know how I got in so deep to the project. The project, in many ways, has felt like a much bigger challenge than I anticipated.
In the test, we found that the top part of the shoe had a tendency to fall down of its own weight. The solution in the second part of the test was to add an additional support point here and tie it back. With that fix, we got the shape that we were looking for.
The outer skin is a red. The next inner skin is the red, but this inside skin is a white clear. Inside that is now black.
This shoe has an area of about 120 square feet.
I've done the changes in the colors to give it a greater sense of depth.
That times 20 pounds per square foot means that this shoe can be subjected to horizontal loads of 2,400 pounds. Okay.
The way that this part, this is a two-wall inflatable, is being put together is that it's being vinyl welded so that the seams really hold the air and have the utmost strength. They're not going to be sewn together because our feeling is that there is so much wind and there's such wind load on the piece that I had to go with the strongest materials and the strongest method of fabricating, which is welded.
Qué difícil es sacarse los mocos con las uñas. ¡Es de cucaracha! ¡Es de cucaracha!
That dictated the selection of fairly substantial eye bolts, which are bolted into the BAM building. And these are basically 3/4 inch eye bolts, each rated for about 10,000 pound capacity.
The shoes, for example, I see as images.
Rain, snow, that type of thing, landing on this has to fall off. It can't pocket down inside.
I mean, I see them as having many layers of meaning.
Further, to aid the shedding of snow or ice, the air that is coming into the shoe is heated.
And one of them is that they're the image of the dancer's discipline.
The inflation system consists of a 3/4 horsepower 12-inch centrifugal fan.
The toe shoe is hard and it's difficult, and it symbolizes discipline. It also symbolizes the sense of sort of high spirit when somebody gets on their toes and lifts up and dances.
don't think it took 3 years. It just took all morning, really.
I'm a former dancer, so they symbolize bloody feet for me too. But I remember all of it fondly.
That shoe does not make me no money, so I pay it no mind.
Well, I actually thought they were something else when I first saw them.
When she said scoach, I said, oh, she must be going to be stoned. When she said, then when I came out here, I said, big balloon ballet slippers. It makes people stop and look, you know. People don't just zoom by.
Makes it feel safe. Takes away some of the grimness of the surrounding area.
It helps the community. Let's put it that way.
I think it's most effective as an apparition.
I just noticed them. It's different. It's nice. Yeah. It is different. Yeah, it makes me smile, you know, because it's something unusual. You know, I wouldn't expect to see ballet slippers hanging on the side of a building. It's unusual. So it makes me feel, you know, makes me smile. It's all right. It's all right.
When the shoes are gone, that space is going to seem very, very empty.
And I learned that even though that I'm not the greatest art fan, and you know, I learned to like these shoes, to tell you the truth.